So welcome to our video where we're going to be focusing on our inner core. Often you'll hear me say, fire up your inner cylinder, fire up your core, activate the lower belly. These are all cues to get you into the idea of activating this system inside of you that's quite deep in the body that really provides strength and stability to our low back and our pelvis. There are 4 components to the core. We have our diaphragm, which is our breathing muscle that sits at the base of our rib cage. We have another set of muscles that's at the very bottom of your pelvic floor here, or the bottom of your pelvis, sorry. So the pelvic floor is like a hammock of muscles that runs from your pubic bone, wraps around to your tailbone, and is in between the 2 bones that you sit on called your tuberosities. So we want to envision or imagine a group of muscles right deep inside at the very base of the pelvis. Around that, supporting that tissue, are little muscles running up and down your spine called your multifidi. Your multifidi basically have this action of very gently compressing your low back in a very nice and stabilizing way. So you can imagine that the space in here gets just a little bit smaller, and they also help to put your back into what we would call a very, very tiny arch or back bend. So if you are over flattened in your low back, it's very hard for your multifidi to work. So you'll often hear me say, flare your tailbone, and that's to encourage you to just think about going into a small little bit of what I call a very micro arch in your low back, but imagine it starting at your tailbone versus right here in the middle of your back. The last muscle that you'll hear me talk about is your transversus, and it's a muscle that wraps all the way around. It's your most inner layer of muscles that's comprised of the abdominal wall. There are 4 layers. Your outer one, those sort of 6 or 8 pack muscles, sit superficially, and they're responsible for big bending motions like that. Underneath that you have an external oblique, and underneath that an internal oblique, and underneath that you have this rounded cylinder muscle called your transversus. You'll often hear me say, draw the 2 pelvic bones, imagine them being drawn towards center below the navel, and that helps to activate that system. Or imagine deep inside of you, you have a cylinder, and it's getting smaller from all 4 sides. So if you imagine that deep within you, there's a muscle that can compress itself inward that supports all the way and wraps around to the spine. What we also do is we lift the pelvic floor muscles up and inward towards the back of the navel, and also focusing on our breath, our diaphragm, helps us to get a full activation of the system. I'm going to go through some cues on the floor to help you get more acquainted with this muscle system, and of course if you have questions at the end of the video, feel free to email me or Facebook post and we'll answer your questions there. We're going to go through our cueing for our deep inner core, starting with our pelvic floor. So I'd like you to grab a chair, you'll come down into sitting, and you're going to place yourself on your chair and just scoot to the front edge of the chair so you can really feel those 2 bones that you sit on, your ischial tuberosities or your sitting bones. Then I want you to imagine your pelvis. So the pelvis is this area down here, this wide bone. It has a front, the pubic bone, right at the base, and at the back is the tailbone. And then the 2 sides that you're sitting on are either side of that pelvis. You're going to picture your pelvis as a clock. So this first set of cues works specifically for females, and we'll have a second set for males as well. These cues were developed by a group of researchers in Vancouver, and what they did is they took real-time ultrasound and they were able to watch on a visual screen how the muscles were contracting in response to these cues. The cues we're using today had the highest rate of success in getting you to contract the muscles appropriately. So we're sitting on the chair. You're going to picture your pelvis as a clock, with the pubic bone being 12 o'clock, your tailbone being 6, your right sitting bone being 9 o'clock, and your left being 3. So females, I want you to imagine drawing a line between 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. So the 6 is reaching towards the 12 is reaching back towards 6, and then imagine 3 and 9 o'clock being drawn towards center, and as everything meets in the center of the pelvis, at the vaginal opening, there's a gentle energy of lifting in the direction of your head. So you're sitting here, you're not really going to see much happening, but I'm imagining 6 going to 12, 12 going to 6, 3 and 9 being drawn towards center, and then I'm feeling the muscles being lifted just up inside without contracting the buttock. You're going to hold for 5 seconds, and then you're going to completely relax and let them go. So this is similar to what you might know as the Kegel, but it's much more specific. You want to just hold 5 seconds, make sure you fully relax, and then you're going to go again. So males, to give you a cue, imagine you're sitting in the same position. You want to imagine drawing up the testicles or the scrotum and drawing them in towards the back of the pubic bone. You're going to hold that for 5 seconds, and then you're going to slowly relax and let it release. We're going to go on to our third set of cues for the same muscles. So females and males, you can imagine there's a guy wire running between your sacrum or your tailbone and being drawn up and forward towards the back of your pubic bone. So you want to imagine drawing a line almost from the anus through to the back of the pubic bone. You should feel this lifting sensation deep within the lowest part of the pelvis. You're going to hold for 5 seconds and then let that relax. Our last cue is this. There are 3 openings at the very base of the pelvis for females. So we're focusing on the vaginal opening, the urethra, and the anus. And you want to have contraction around all 3. So as you're sitting here, you can imagine that you're closing off your urethra as if to stop the flow of urine. And you're also closing gently off around the anus as if to stop the flow of flatulence, or just flatulence. And just imagine holding gently for 5 seconds and then gently release. So you don't want to feel like it's the buttock squeezing, but really deep inside there's this internal towards center and lifting action towards the center of the head. So I'll have you go one more time. You're going to hold for 5 seconds. Head is stacked over the rest of the spine, and then you're going to gently relax. And now we'll move on to our second set of muscles, your transversus. We're going to head down to the mat. So we're ready to work on the next set of muscles, the transversus muscles. They're the ones that wrap all the way around the body, from the front through to your spine. We're going to go ahead and lie down on our side. You may want to have a towel and a block handy and a pillow. So as you go to lie down, you're going to place a towel in the sides of the ribs here. When we lie down, our ribs kind of stick to the sides, so we want to help keep alignment. So placing that down on the floor, you might double fold it or single fold it, lying down on your side, and you're going to place a block in between your knees. The pillow is here so that your head is in a nice alignment. You might choose to double fold it or single fold it. We're focusing on this wraparound muscle below the navel, and it really does run from your sternum all the way to the pubic bone. In this position, take your fingers and just place them onto the hip bone, or I should say the pelvic bone out front, and take them so that they just dig in a little deep, about 1 centimeter or so. You want to imagine being long and tall from the head to the tail. And in this position, you can go ahead and re-envision those pelvic floor muscles. But in addition to that, I want you to imagine that the muscle tissue from this lower pelvis here is kind of lifting up towards the midline. So the contraction is running up this way versus head to toe. So in this position, just imagine drawing that lower belly up towards the center midline and towards the pubic bone, and hold and release. So what you should feel is that deep down there's a gentle tensioning that occurs kind of below the navel as you activate your pelvic floor, and imagine lifting the bottom up towards the top. You're going to hold for 5 seconds and relax. So again, being mindful that you're not just squeezing the buttock. We'll try one more time, activating the pelvic floor, and then imagining a line running between these 2 bones as things are being drawn towards center. So it's not the same as just pulling the belly button in, but imagine that the front body is getting shorter across the front or more narrow. Hold. It's as though you have a corset that's being shortened on the inside or cinched in. Hold 5 seconds and release. From here, I'm going to turn over just to give you an idea of how we get those muscles in the back body firing your multifidi. So turning over, I'm going to face this direction, lying back down on my side. So here in this position is your spine. And what we're imagining here is that this part of our spine is getting lightly compressed. What it might look like in this position is as though I'm drawing my tailbone up my body in the direction of my skull. So you might want to take your fingers and place them to the side of your spine. And just imagine that you're basically shortening this area just a little bit, and you might just feel a little bit of arch in your back. It's a very small, tiny motion, and it's a hard one to feel. But what we're envisioning is that we do this small little arch, and we feel these muscles right at the base of our back here. Once you feel them contract, you can use them to gently lift your legs, and you'll feel that fire just that little bit more. So I'll do one more, contract and lift. What you want to be careful of is it's not these muscles here that are contracting, but really the ones on the sides of your spine. So to put it all together, you're going to come onto your back, take your fingers to the inside of those pelvic bones, and in this position I want you to imagine starting with your pelvic floor, finding the lift. Imagine the transversus contracting across the front, and feel that nice gentle energy running up the sides of your spine, kind of as though there's a small little bit of compression, until you feel muscle firing deep inside of the low belly here. Once you have that, when we go through our core exercises, we want to activate here first, so that if, say, for example, we do abdominal curls, we're set in our lower pelvis, our inner core is active, and then from there we can use the superficial muscles to bring us in to an abdominal curl. If we haven't contracted well through here, as you come up, you'll notice the stomach will bulge out and upward versus being compressed and held deeply from within. That allows us to lift our upper body. So I hope that you got something out of that. If you have more questions, of course, feel free to ask. And now you should have a deeper sense of connection to how to feel those inner core muscles working through all of your exercises. Make sure that when you do practice, you practice turning them on and you allow them to relax. And when we're doing our exercises, it goes with the flow of the breath. Often on an exhale, it's a little bit easier to get connected to the contraction. So wishing you luck with that, and we'll see you in our next video.